Greetings everybody, and welcome back to the Lupine Weekly Budget Battles, where we set up a locals hosted over on the Discord at 7 p.m. CEST, where the only rule is your deck can only cost $50. You may be looking at this list now and realizing that there's a lot of cards here that aren't actually TCG legal. This is because we have now launched our first official ban list change for the $50 format, which looks like this. A lot of changes were made for the sort of health of the format as we realized that there were a lot of trouble cards that just kind of ran around and had a very different impact when you can't really afford to deal with them, so a lot of the cards have simply been rotated out. We also brought back a couple of cards wanting to see if they make a difference in the slightest, and they're also back now. I will be showing you this deck list that we're actually playing in the Lupine Weekly, and then I will be showing you a TCG legal version of the deck list that you could bring to your own locals that would perform basically the same thing. Today, we are playing Rescue Ace, the fire archetype that was sometimes played alongside Snake Eyes and then other random fire decks of the format, with the general game plan of summoning Rescue Ace Turbulence and setting 4 Rescue Ace spell traps from your deck, where one of them protects your Rescue Aces, one of them pops a card, and one of them is an infinite impermanence, and then a bunch of other support cards that kind of do stuff. In doing so, they also have a lot of other monsters that react whenever your opponent does something, as long as you control another Rescue Ace, so flooding the board and sort of slow controlling is kind of the name of the game here. We're gonna go through the deck that we're playing in the Lupine Weekly quickly, and then once this is done, I'll show you the normal TCG one, or you can skip down below if you want to see the TCG legal deck list right away. Now, let's talk about Turbulence. This is the main man himself, but we're only playing one of him because it's fairly easy to recover. You can banish 2 Rescue Ace cards from your graveyard to special summon this card from your hand, and during your main phase, you can set up to 4 Rescue Ace quick play spells, normal traps with different names directly from your deck. Then, if another card you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, except during the damage step, you get a target card in field and destroy it. This card is actually really strong and is usually the playmaker that we go for every time. We're then playing 2 Rescue Ace Preventer, which can banish 1 Rescue Ace monster from your graveyard to special summon this card from your hand, and if you control another Rescue Ace, it turns into a Book of Moon. Then if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one of your banished Rescue Ace monsters except a level 8 and special summon it. This means that Turbulence and Preventer cannot be Turbulence can, but Preventer cannot be special summoned, as Preventer is the only level 8. You can still summon Turbulence because it's a 9. We then play 1 Fire Engine. If a Rescue Ace monster is normal special summoned to your field, except himself, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if a monster is special summoned to your opponent's side of the field, except during the damage step, you can special summon a level 4 or lower Rescue Ace monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Essentially, if we leave Fire Engine on board, it is usually to summon either Airlifter from the deck, which we're going next, or Impulse. We are also playing 1 singular Fire Attacker, which has the same stipulation as Fire Engine. However, if your opponent adds a card to their hand by any means from anywhere, we get to draw 2 cards and then discard a card. It helps us filter our hand sometimes, and going second, this is a really useful tool because we have ways of getting it out before our turn. Then we have Rescue Ace Airlifter, which is one of our starters. If this is normal or special summon, you can add a Rescue Ace spell from your deck to your hand, and when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, you contribute this card from your hand to special summon a Rescue Ace from your hand, except itself. This usually searches us any of the spells that we are missing in order to get to where we want to be, so we're playing 3 of them. We're also playing 3 Rescue Ace Impulse, which is possibly the best card in the entire deck. During your main phase, you can choose 1 effect monster your opponent controls with the highest attack, and do keep in mind to choose, not target, and neither player can activate that monster's effect on the field this turn. This comes up against decks like Blue Eyes, because they kind of have to force negate here, and if they don't force negate, they have to tag out their Spirit Dragon, and it does a bunch of stuff. However, you can also tribute this card from your hand or face up field to special summon any Machine Rescue Ace monster from your deck. Usually what ends up happening is we keep Impulse in our hand as a pseudo hand trap in order to special summon Preventer from the deck to get a Book of Moon that our opponent isn't ready for. It's actually incredibly strong. Our last Rescue Ace card that we're playing is one of the main playmakers, Rescue Ace Hydrant. When you control a Rescue Ace monsters other than Hydrant, your opponent cannot target this card for attacks, and your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. Once per turn, you can get a quick play spell or a trap card that was set by the let's try that again. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. You can activate a quick play spell or trap card that was set by the effect of a Rescue Ace card the turn it was set, and during your main phase, you can add one Rescue Ace monster from your deck to your hand, except Hydrant. Wow, I can talk. Generally speaking, if we summon Hydrant, we're going to search Turbulence most of the time, and then activating any of our spells to send it to the graveyard and linking this off for an Anima, we can simply send them both off and set 4, and then get him back before our opponent gets to play, because all of the actual spell traps have different effects whether or not you have Hydrant on the field, and that is good to keep note of. In terms of our hand traps, we are playing our newly unbanned Psyframe Gear Gamma for our format. It's been a while since we saw this guy. It's kind of nice to have him back because he is a very solid hand trap option for our format. But, of course, in the TCG League of 1, he will not be here, you will see later. We then also play 3 Joel and Lockbird, the absolute meta destroyer for us. This card ruins so many decks, and it is hilarious. In order to get where we want to go, we're playing 1/1 for 1, 3 Piri Reese map, because do keep in mind that Hydrant is a level 1, so searching it out with Piri Reese map is very good. We're playing a Pot of Prosperity, and we're playing a Reinforcement of the Army, because the Rescue Ace Airlifter is a warrior. On top of that, let's look at the Rescue Ace spell traps. We have 3 copies of Alert, where we can add a Rescue Ace monster from our graveyard to our hand, but if we control Hydrant, we can add a Rescue Ace monster from our deck to our hand instead. Then we're playing 3 copies of Emergency, which is possibly one of the best starters we have access to. We special summon 1 Rescue Ace monster from our deck in defense position, and then tribute 1 Rescue Ace monster from our hand or field. During the main phase, we can banish this card from our graveyard, then target a Rescue Ace trap in the graveyard to set it, and we can only use each effect of Emergency once. Technically speaking, this means that any of our Rescue Ace cards becomes any other Rescue Ace card without using our normal summon, which is very, very good for this deck, so we're playing 3. We then have 1 copy of Rescue, where we can target a Rescue Ace monster in our graveyard, or if we control Hydrant, we can target a monster in an opponent's graveyard, special summon it to our field. This is a pseudo... It's obviously a quick play Monster Reborn, first of all, but it's also sort of a DD Crow, because we can kind of just snatch one of the cards from our opponent's graveyard if we control Hydrant. It does come up a fair amount of the time. We're then playing 2 Contain, which if a Rescue Ace... Do keep in mind, we have to control a Rescue Ace for all of the traps. We target an effect monster opponent controls, and this turn, that effect monster cannot attack. Also, its effects are negated. Then, if we control Hydrant at the resolution of this effect, that monster also cannot be used as material for a Fusion, Sync, or Exceed, or Link Summon this turn. Essentially, we can lock out our opponent from using one of their key cards if we control Hydrant. Lastly, we also have Extinguish, which, if we control a Rescue Ace, we can target an effect on opponent's controls and destroy it. Then, if you currently control Rescue Ace Hydrant, your opponent cannot activate the effects of the destroyed monster or monsters with the same original name this turn. Then there is a 3rd trap card that some just sort of omit entirely, but we've chosen to play for budget reasons. Reinforce. We target a Rescue Ace monster, and for the rest of the turn, that monster controls gains 1500 attack and defense, is unaffected by opponent's monster effects, and the next time it will be destroyed by battle, it is not destroyed. We can also banish this card from the graveyard and then target any Rescue Ace spell in our graveyard to set it. Normally, this will go to HQ if our opponent decides to destroy it, because this is our field spell. While your opponent controls a monster, all Rescue Aces gain 500 attack and defense, and during your main phase 1, you can normal summon 1 additional Rescue Ace card in addition to our normal summon set. In addition to that, once per turn, we can target 4 of our Rescue Ace cards that are banished and or in the graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, and then draw a card. This gives us recursion, and that is why we're playing very few copies of all of our traps and spells, because the field spell can usually shuffle them back in and can be searched by Airlifter, so it's really not that hard to get a hold of them. The last card we're playing in the deck that we haven't really gone over is Called by the Grave, because hand traps are hand traps, and Ultimate Slayer. A lot of decks now, even though we banned most of the powerful Blue Eyes support, Blue Eyes is still incredibly playable, and people are still kind of rocking it. So Ultimate Slayer is a very clean out for something like Blue Eyes, because they can't respond with Spirit Dragon when they use it, and if they make the Ultimate Dragon, they can't respond with that either. We just shuffle it back into the deck, and we're a happy little guy. Then for the extra deck, we're playing the Ultimate Slayer targets in Garura. We're playing Golden Cloud Beast Malong, and unfortunately we can't afford Meteorolic Aggregator for Exceed, so we just shoved Time Thief Redoer in there and called it a day. For links, we're trying Tri-Brigade Arms Bicephalus 2 as one of the best Ultimate Slayer targets. Then for our own extra deck that kind of rarely comes up. This deck doesn't really play with the extra deck all that much, but we're playing Underworld Goddess, we're playing Mech-Knight Crusadia Avermax, Amphibious Swarmship, Amblo Whale, World Sea Dragon Sealantis, because sometimes you can tag this out with Amblo Whale and do some funky stuff with that. Promethean Princess Bestower of Flames, we're playing a Nightmare Unicorn, Heat of the Fire Charmer Ablaze, an SP Little Knight, an IP Masquerena, and a Relinquished Anima. Then we're also playing the Psyframe Lord Omega for obvious reasons, because we now have the Psyframe Gear Gamma, and sometimes this might actually come up. Our side deck is incredibly basic. We're playing 3 Artifact Lancea to prevent banishing, 3 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit in case they were on back row shenanigans that we need to deal with immediately, 1 Heavy Storm, which is our replacement for Harpy's Feather Duster due to a price issue in Omega at the moment, but again, for the TCG version, this will obviously obviously be Harpies. Then we got 2 Cosmic Cyclone, 3-Dimensional Barrier, 1 Red Reboot, which we brought back, and 2 Solemn Strike. What we're hoping to accomplish today is generally just set up our board of a bunch of interactions, prevent our opponent from playing their game, and then through looping recursion, really take over the board. But there's only one way to find out if that works. But before we go there, let's check the TCG legal version as well. So here is the TCG legal version. As you see, we've basically just shifted a couple of cards around, but basically everything else remains the same. The 3 Gammas and Driver here are simply removed, and we put Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit into the deck instead, now making it a solid 40. From the extra deck, we have removed the Omega, as we no longer need it for any reason, and we've put in a Nightmare Phoenix instead. And in the side deck, we have simply removed the Heavy Storm and the Red Reboot, and we're playing 3 copies of Book of Eclipse, and Harpy's Feather Duster, and 3 copies of Solemn Strike instead. It is a fairly similar list, not a lot of changes here really make or break the deck, as you can kind of experiment in any direction you want, and this in the TCG will do perfectly fine as it is. It does not need the silly support that our format has. Regardless of that though, let's head right into the duels and see exactly what this deck can actually. Now for the first round, we're actually going to speed through these very quickly. We were playing up against King Diabetes, who's playing the Arcana Force Turnlock. In our first duel, he doesn't quite manage to actually get to the Turnlock, as he's only able to set up Bagooska, which we have the answer for in Ultimate Slayer, and that essentially wins us the game on the spot. The Arcana Force deck is a very fragile sort of playstyle, because if you do manage to get the turn skip block going, there's nothing your opponent is going to be able to do to stop it, because as long as you control Light Barrier, and I believe it's the Sun, you can't actually activate monster effects, and that is most of our interaction against this deck. So we are just going to go ahead and we're going to fill our board with as many guys as we physically can. As you can see, we are basically sitting on almost lethal. We're not quite able to make it here, even if we summoned our big boy Turbulence, because we are just going to tag out one of our guys for Turbulence, activate Turbulence, set up the 4, and end our turn on that. And it is very quickly realizing that he's not going to be able to do anything from there, so we take a game number 1. Unfortunately, we are not as lucky in game number 2, even though we open 2 Duel and Lockbird. It doesn't actually matter against Arcana Force, because they only ever search a card once, and this is the time that they do it. Having Light Barrier available to them means that he is just going to pop off with, quote-unquote, the Sun. And unshockingly here, we try to go for a Fire Attacker during our turn to actually get some setup, but he doesn't add anything to hand after this because it's Arcana Force. He gives us the world locks us out of doing anything, and that is essentially the end of the game, as we are not going to be able to do anything on this board once he summons back the world. Game number 3 is unfortunately much of the same, as we open an Airlifter, and basically a really good hand for what we're attempting to do. We'll go for the 1-for-1, pitch the Airlifter to get Hydrant onto the board, activate Hydrant, searching Turbulence. At this point, we can now activate Alert, meaning we can add any card to our hand, and we're going to add Impulse. Now with 2 Rescue Ace cards in the graveyard after we activate Alert, we activate Alert to search the Fire Engine, we can now activate Turbulence, banishing 2, which will trigger the Fire Engine, get our Turbulence onto the board, set 4, and we do have an Impulse in hand in order to summon something on our opponent's turn. Unfortunately, he already has Light Barrier and the Sun, and I want to point out the main effect of, I think it's the Sun at least, I'm going to actually find out. Yes, if you Tails the Sun, it will destroy all cards in the spell and trap zones, which would absolutely annihilate us. Now do keep in mind, this thing is basically freaking invincible. Like, he's just gonna keep this alive. We do ahead and we activate Fire Engineer to get a free special summon, and then we chain Contain, targeting the Sun, but of course, he has a Book of Eclipse. The one card that can stop us from interacting with his combo is in his hand. He's going to activate it, we're going to Fizzle, of course, and he's going to get the Sun off. The Sun is going to blow up everything. We don't even have Turbulence face up, so we can destroy the Light Barrier here. He gets the TTT to draw 2, he gets into Light Force, and from there he has full combo. He's going to turn lock us, and our board cannot sustain against a 4K beater for more than 1 turn. Yeah, it's what it is. For duel number 2, then, we're up against Lardax, who's today playing, I believe, some sort of Unchained Fiend list. He goes for Dark Beckoning Beast, searching Opening of the Spirit Gates, to which we are immediately going to Duel and Lockbird, because that's all we can do. As you can see, our hand here is absolutely disgusting as well, because there is absolutely nothing we can do with it. He ends on an Impermanence, Soul of Yama Pass, and we draw into another Duel and Lockbird. Oh boy, it's going to be one of those games. Opening of the Spirit Gates hit and gets another Dark Beckoning Beast, and he's going to do his combo once more, unlike us, who is just going to droll him for the second time. Double Dark Beckoning Beast going into Abyss Actor Super Producer, which can now pop the Rakeya. Rakeya can summon Sharvara. Sharvara does not get to use its effect here because it would have to search a card again, and he can't because he's under droll, so he's just going to punch us for a bazillion damage. He goes into the next interaction we can't stop, gets an escape of the Unchained, which means we have to play through 2 interactions on a hand that can't play through a single one. We do draw into Emergency, which lets us actually summon the Airlifter. Airlifter here gets Impermanence, which we kind of expected, and we're just going to tribute summon the driver. YOLO, get him! We kill the dog comes back because of Soul of Yama, so it doesn't even matter. He gets Shavara back as well because Recursion. We're going to Alert. Alert is going to add Fire Engine back to our hand, and let's be honest here, that hand was not doing anything. The unfortunate terms of drawing driver. We're back in that format again, baby. Now for game number 2, our hand is looking well off this time. We're going to go ahead for the Airlifter. Airlifter is going to search Emergency, and we're going to fire off Emergency here in order to tag out the Airlifter for a Hydrant. Hydrant is going to go ahead and search us Turbulence from the deck, and now that we have 2 cards in our graveyard to use, we're just going to banish both of them to get Turbulence. Turbulence is going to manage to set the 4. We get ourselves, so you can see, we get a Reinforce, a Contain, a Rescue, and an Extinguish. We activate the Alert to search the Impulse, so we can send another card from our deck to the field. We get ahead and we activate our Pot of Prosperity. We get ourselves an Airlifter for the following turn. We set the Cosmic Cyclone, and we pass turn. He sets 1, activates Redea, to which we chain the Cosmic Cyclone, targeting the set Abominable Chamber of the Unchained to prevent him from getting effects. He then sets 2 cards and passes back to us, so now we have to attempt to go for the kill. Unfortunately, he is playing Unchained, and our only way of really dealing with the board is destroying stuff, meaning it's going to be really hard to break through. We go for the Airlifter. We also get the Fire Attacker off of this. We'll add Rescue Ace HQ from the deck to our hand. We'll activate HQ because he controls a monster. Then we'll go in, and of course it's Aruha. Aruha is going to trigger and summon Rakea. We have to kill Rakea, which is going to trigger to summon Shavara. We have to go ahead and destroy Shavara as well to try and even break through, but he's just going to keep going, and there is an escape of the Unchained. At this point, we're once again in the same position, so we're just going to set up IP Masquerena. We're going to shuffle 4 cards back into the deck from our banish using the field spell. Get another Impulse, set Decalled by the Grave, and hope that he can't start playing off. He goes for another opening of the Spirit Gates, hitting the Dark Beckoning Beast once more, and he's just going to do the same thing again. Dark Beckoning Beast comes out, he's going to activate it, we're going to contain it, but we get hit with the gold star of the show, Red Reboot. The entire turn now, we are locked out of trap cards, which means we are essentially a sitting duck. We have 2 interactions in Rescue and Called by the Grave, neither of them do much. He goes for the Yama. We do get a Preventer from the deck thanks to Impulse as he gets Shavara. Flipping down a Link deck, though, is incredibly hard, so we're going to go for the SP, and we're going to banish the set card that he wants to destroy. He chains the Shavara to destroy the set card, to which we activate, I believe, something. I forgot. We tag out the Soul of Shavara. That's what we do. Unchained Solar Disaster hits. We do flip it face down, but it gets destroyed by another Rakea in hand, so it didn't even matter. We're going to Called by the Grave the target for the Rakea. He gets himself the Soul of Disaster back. He tags out the Turbulence, using it to make Soul of Rage. He activates the Spirit Gates in order to summon a card and pops. Of course, the last card in his hand is Fiendish Rhino Warrior as well, which lets him get Shiyama into the graveyard to tag out and make the DDD High King Caesar, I think is the level 6 that they make. I forget. He does manage to go into the Unchained Abomination through Link Climbing, and of course he has the guys on board. We're going to activate Rescue in the battle phase, summoning back Turbulence, meaning he can't actually fight through anything here, so we get another turn. He's going to activate Sarama. Sarama's going to set back the Abominable Chamber. He's going to activate the Unchained Abomination because a card was destroyed to destroy our Turbulence once again. He's then going to pop our Field Spell, doing the same thing, and here is Aruha. He is then going to exceed over into DDD, Wave King High Caesar, that's the name of the card, and end to us. During the end phase, he gets to pop another card because of Abomination. SP and the Yama comes back, and we're looking very, very bleak. We're going to go for the Impulse. This is going to stop the Abomination from activating its effect this turn, and then we're going to activate Extinguish to get rid of the Negate. This, of course, does trigger the DDD to search Dark Contract and add a spell due to Sharama being sent. So Wailing on the Intercell comes back. We're going to Reinforce, then activate Reinforce to get the field spell back into action so we can actually attempt to draw a card and do something with our turn. But in doing so, we shuffle back a lot of the targets, and 1 for 1. Can't use that. We just go into battle. We have to sort of start beating through the board, and unfortunately, the Abominable Soul is just going to pop another card. We have to go over the Yama to make sure he doesn't Link Climb any further. We set 2 pass, and here comes everything. We're going to contain the Unchained Soul. He gets the Unchained Soul of Anguish, which means he's just going to link off our guy. Wailing is going to be activated. We are going to attempt to strike here to get rid of the Link 3. The Link 3 is going to get a card back, but of course he has the Yama in the graveyard, so he gets the Unchained Soul of Disaster. We can't really do anything. We tag out for a Fire Engine to avoid being linked off, but he has the Tour Guide. This deck just doesn't stop. We do get a guy out, and it is Airlifter. Airlifter is going to search us a card. He's going to search us Alert. It's not going to matter much, though, because he has made a Nightmare Phoenix, popping our field spell, and now he is strong enough to beat through our entire board fairly easily. He has the Abomination's Prison to search another chamber of the Unchained, and I'm going to be honest here, there's nothing we can do. He goes for the Underworld Goddess of the Coast World to punch over us. The Chained Abomination can't attack this turn, so we do get one more turn. We have to fire off the alerts. The Abominable Chamber brings back the Unchained Soul of Rage, and no matter what we do here, he has way more interactions that we can handle. We're going to grab a Rescue, but Rescue is just going to be negated by Underworld Goddess because it's a summon from the graveyard. We can't do anything. That's the end of the game. The recursion of Unchained in this deck is really hard to deal with because most of our removal is straight up destruction or flipping cards face down. What do Unchained want to do? Well, they want to destroy their own cards and can't be flipped face down. Really hard matchup for Rescue Ace here, but the fact that we held on as long as we did kind of gives me hope for this deck regardless. But let's go on to game number 3. For game number 1, we are up against Shadow Crow on Lightsworn somehow. We get to go first, and we do have the Period map in order to search the Hydrant, and with that, we basically have full combo. We'll go Hydrant here, search ourselves the Turbulence, because we do have ways of getting it out. We'll activate Alert to add Impulse to our hand, once again setting up that extra interaction. We'll link off for an Anima. This way, we can summon our Turbulence. We can set 5 and pass. We've set a Reinforce, Extinguish, Emergency, Contain, and Contain. These are not once per turn, by the way. It's good to point out. He is going to go ahead and he is going to summon Lumina, and at this point I realize immediately that if he's summoning Lumina first, he has bricked hard. We'll go for the Emergency in order to get Preventer onto the board and pitch the Airlifter that we searched, and then immediately activate it to flip down the Lumina. That ends the duel immediately as he realizes that was his only play, and we stopped it dead. For the second duel then, we've opened slightly worse, but he's making us go first again, so I think it's still doable. We go ahead and we normal summon Impulse in order to special summon a Fire Attacker, linking them both off for an IP Masquerena. We then go ahead and we activate Rescue Ace Preventer to banish the Fire Attacker, and then using the IP Masquerena and the Preventer, we go ahead and we summon Promethean Princess. Preventer is then going to activate because it was sent from the field to the graveyard, and we get the Fire Attacker back. In doing so, we're going to activate the Promethean Princess, and we're going to special summon back the Preventer, and that's honestly our turn. I should probably have set Reinforce here, but considering we don't really have a target for it, I don't think it matters. Fire Attacker will allow us to draw 2, Preventer can flip a card face down, and we do have a Cosmic Cyclone just in case. He's going to go ahead and activate Charge of the Light Brigade, pitching 3 and grabbing himself Raiden. And it's Lightsworn time, because you can see the wolf in the graveyard. He added a card to his hand, so we do get to draw 2, and the draws are Reinforcement of the Army and Rescue Ace Airlifter, which is not entirely great. He gets a wolf, and we pitch the Rhoda. Solo Recharge is going to allow him to draw even more. He gets a Wise into the graveyard to special summon Felis. Another charge lets him add another card, and he adds the Dragonling, sending a bunch of cards to the graveyard, and we are off to the races. Dragonling is going to be activated. He sends the Lightsworn Judgment in order to search Judgment Dragon. There he is. It's Judgment Dragon Turbo, baby. He is going to go ahead and make the Unicorn. Unicorn is going to spin back the Indestructible Promethean Princess. He then goes for JD. JD is going to activate, destroying everything, to which we flip it down using our Preventer before we really get to do anything else. But it turns out he has the second Judgment Dragon in hand, so it didn't freaking matter. He goes for Raiden, pitches 2, gets another Wolf onto the board amazingly. He goes for Plague Spreader Zombie, manages to exceed into the Minerva, pitch a bunch of more cards, gets a Wise in hand, revealing his Wolf to go on top of the deck, and then mill itself to summon it back. He goes for a Coral Dragon, and he is just short of killing us here as we go down to, I believe, 500 life points. Yep, 600 life points even. We are on death's door, and we have to out double Judgment Dragon. We do draw into our field spell here, though, which is really good. We're going to go for the Airlifter. Airlifter is going to add us Emergency, which we're basically in at this point. We activate the field spell. We flip open Emergency to get the Hydrant. Hydrant is going to allow us to go live. We're going to search the Turbulence that we never got to summon earlier, and now that we can, we're going to bring it out. We banish Dupe, we set 4 from the deck, it's the same targets as before. We're going to go for immediately activating Extinguish because of Hydrant's effect to pop one of the JDs. Then we're going to activate Emergency's effect from the graveyard to set back the Extinguish so we have it live for later. We then go Rescue Ace HQ, shuffling 4 cards back from the banish and graveyard in order to draw an additional card and hoping it's a good one. It is an Emergency, which is actually pretty good. We're going to go ahead and we're going to link off into Relinquished Anima. We're going to use Anima's effect to steal the Coral Dragon, and we're going to punch over the Minerva. Minerva's going to die and mill a bunch of cards and unfortunately destroy our other guy that I was going to use to destroy JD because I did this in the wrong order, but it's okay. Wolf is going to set. We are going to get another Contain onto the board, and now we don't even have a Rescue Ace, which is bad. But luckily for us, we did set Rescue for this exact reason, as we bring back Hydrant. We're then going to activate Alert. Alert is going to let us add anything, and we'll add Impulse, meaning if he activates any effect, we'll have a Rescue Ace on the board. He goes for JD. JD is going to activate. We are going to chain the Impulse, and we are going to hit it with Contain, and then summon the Preventer. It gets shot. Here comes the Aaron, the Lightsworn Monk, which actually shuffles cards back into the deck, which is scary. There's Minerva, the Aethesian Lightsworn, the new Lightsworn card that sends the Dragonling. Fearless also gets sent. Here's Fearless. Fearless tags itself out to destroy the Anima, which is interesting of a choice. We go to battle phase. We flip down the JD because I completely forgot that it couldn't attack anyway. He shuffles one of our cards back into the deck. We're going to go for an emergency to tag Fire Engine in instead so that he can't destroy something. He goes for the Phoenix. We do get to special summon an Airlifter here, but he is going to destroy our field spell, which is fine, as we'll just grab an Alert. We have somehow managed to survive the onslaught of Judgment Dragons for one turn, as Shadowcrow is sitting on 2 cards left in deck. So if we can out this remaining Judgment Dragon, I think we're in the clear. We go for the Alert. Alert is going to add back Turbulence, as we need him to beat over stuff. We're going to Turbulence, send 2 cards to the Banish Zone, set 2 from our deck, which is Alert and Emergency, as we have nothing else. Emergency is going to set Contain, which deals with the Judgment Dragon. We're going to go for Impulse, but then going to link a bunch of cards away in order to go into... This gets really annoying here. We link 2 cards away for Heat of the Fire Charmer so that we have an extra link monster, and then link those 2, or that and another monster away for SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight banishes the Judgment Dragon, and then we use the remaining material to go into Princess. Princess then summons Turbulence back, and we can go to battle. He does have an electromagnetic turtle in the graveyard that I didn't realize, and hey, we can't battle this turn. That sucks. We're going to set the Reinforce that we've been holding in our hand now and pray to God that whatever card he has left doesn't end the game. We are going to immediately fire off Alert to get the Impulse to summon something back from the deck in case we need to. He's simply going to go to battle and punch over the Promethean Princess here, which I suppose makes sense. We are going to activate Emergency. We're going to tag out the Impulse for Airlifter. Airlifter is going to activate and search as the last emergency in the deck. In doing so, we draw into Ultimate Slayer, which is the cleanest out for this board I've ever seen. We're going to activate Emergency. This is going to set back the Extinguish. We're going to activate Ultimate Slayer. Pitch, I believe the name is Malong. That way we can spin back the Minerva, and Malong allows us to return another card to our opponent's hand. So we out the board entirely. We set the last card. He has a Bacon Saver, which again saves him from battle this turn. He draws his last pathetic card. He activates Plague Spreader to shuffle 1 back, but we destroy that using Promethean Princess, and that's the end of the game. We actually held on for that freaking long. This is where this deck really shines, and I think this duel is a perfect example of this. Rescue Ace wants to stay in the game for extended periods of time and grind your opponent down slowly. Normally speaking, that isn't a good thing, but this deck does it really well. Let's go review this thing. Alright, and that was Rescue Ace. Unfortunately, didn't really get the showing that I would have liked it to, because in, training with the actual TCG legal list, it did excruciatingly well, even against meta-relevant decks. But that's kind of where this deck falters, I suppose. There's a lot of things about this deck that I like. The fact that there are a million starters that basically get you exactly to where you go, and you know your clear line to get there every time. There are interaction ways in every single place on the board: banish, graveyard, field, hand. Your opponent is going to have a hard time figuring out where your tricks lie. But it also has one of the most straightforward game plans in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that kind of makes it suffer a bit. Regardless of that, though, let's score this darn thing. For power, we're scoring it a 6 for a very simple reason. There are so many ways of interacting. Not only Turbulence being the strongest one, being able to set 4 cards straight from your deck, which is one of the most obscenely powerful effects I've ever seen, but also cards like Preventer being able to just Book of Moon something basically at command, Impulse being able to summon anything you need at the time to the field, drawing some cards, summoning more guys. It's just got interactions on every single level. Not only that, it has an in-house Infinite Impermanence and a pop, in addition to being able to, again, summon things from your opponent's graveyard sometimes. It interacts on so many levels. Unfortunately, as I said, if your opponent knows how this deck works, they can stop you dead nearly immediately. Problem with this is Turbulence. Turbulence is a magnet for literally any hand trap in the game that can deal with him. Infinite Impermanence is one of the worst ones. For us in our format, obviously, gammaing him is the correct way of doing anything, because then we don't even get to keep him on the board, and that's generally very bad. Not getting off Turbulence's effect is the worst feeling in the world, and there are so many ways of getting you to there. Duel and Lockbird also hurts in this deck a lot if we open something like Hydrant, because that means we can't activate cards like Alert, or sometimes even, what's the other one? I believe it's Rescue. If we get hit with a Ghost Bell, we can't get enough cards into the graveyard to summon Turbulence, and then we're stuck on the board with nothing but a 0-attack dingus. There's a lot of interactions, there's a lot of possibilities, but it sucks when it gets hit. So for consistency, speaking of which, it gets an 8. There are so many ways of starting in this deck. We've, of course, got all 3 airlifters. We got our 2 hydrants, because this is most of the cost in the deck. These things are $7 each. But then we have 3 emergency that essentially do exactly the same thing. 3 alert, which with hydrant is just full combo. 3 Peri map, which gets us to hydrant. And then rescue in case we need it. And Rhoda and 1-for-1. And there's a million ways of starting here that all kind of work. Even if we open something terrible like just Impulse can help us get stuff too. So generally speaking, since our only real game plan is to set up Turbulence exactly, consistency is very easy in this. You have a million ways of getting into Turbulence, just get him onto the board and you're set to go. Resistance, on the other hand, then gives a straight up 4, because as I said, this deck is weak to just about anything. Anything that stops us from actually activating or getting to Turbulence at all will basically mean we are sitting ducks and we can't do anything until our opponent is done playing, which is super unfortunate. Sideboarding also gets a 4 here, because unfortunately with Rescue Ace, once your opponent do figure out what you're intending to do, they can sideboard anything in against you that will stop Turbulence exactly, and we can't really change our game plan that much. The entirety of the Rescue Ace engine really revolves around resolving Turbulence and getting all of those cards onto the field, and there's not a hell of a lot we can do to sort of alter that. Yes, we can change our hand trap lineup to try and better stop our opponent, or take him back row removal and things like this, but we can't really change 70% of our deck. It kind of has to be there, and that's not great. Lastly, this gets a straight up 5 for fun, because yes, while it is fun to get into those control-y, grindy games with this deck that this deck really enjoys, this is modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Even at the $50 mark, it's very rare for us to get into games where we do get this grind game. The last game up against Lightsworn was a very good example of this, because they're both very grind-heavy decks. Yes, they can combo off like there's no tomorrow, but they really like those prolonged games. Unchained really doesn't, and Arcana Force is a turn lockout. They are kind of bad examples of this, and that is where the deck struggles, because in games where they are intending to end the game very quickly, we can't really do that. In an absolute god hand, we can OTK, but that's few and far between being able to do so. We kind of need 2 or 3 turns to whittle down our opponent, which gives them opportunities to fight back, and if they can out the board, we're in a bad spot. This ends the deck with 27 points, ending it at D rank, and I really do think that if you were allowed to spend more than $50 on this deck, there are significant improvements you can do to it. This deck lives and dies by hand traps, so if you were able to play mulch armies and things like this to prevent your opponent from really playing further, that's insanely good. Our extra deck could also be improved a little bit, because we couldn't play stuff like Meteoric Exaggerator, whatever the hell that Exceed card is that you do with Ultimate Slayer. But it's still very decent. I hate not giving it more points than I have, because I did actually really enjoy playing this deck. It's just very unfortunate that it didn't get further. But alright, before we sign off, we've got to head back into the wheel, because we're spinning the wheel, baby. Alright then, 14 decks remain on the wheel that I have constructed for the Lupine Weekly. Let's see what we'll end up playing next week. There's a lot of decks on here I would rather not, but we'll find out what we're doing. We are going to be playing Melodious. Melodious is an interesting archetype that literally sends up a board that is unaffected and can't be destroyed by battle and hopes your opponent doesn't run a kaiju and kind of sit on it, but it is incredibly consistent. That's where Melodious shines, so we'll see how well that ends up doing next week. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Remember to subscribe-leo and click the like button or whatever. And if you want a deck on the wheel, we have channel memberships back online, which will allow you to put your favorite deck on the wheel and punish me by having to play it. As always, remember to stay safe out there.